Hey there folks, let me tell you, if you want to catch more bass and bigger bass on bladed jigs, then you want to stay tuned to this here video, because I'm going to give you some tips that'll put more fish in the boat and also bigger fish in the boat, so hang in there. Hey, why don't we go fishing? Come on. Well, hey there folks, I'm out here on Dickinson Bayou this morning, or actually this afternoon, and I'm gonna try to give you some tips on how to be more effective in fishing bladed jigs. Now I know the first question you're gonna have, or at least a lot of you are gonna have, is what's a bladed jig? Well, a bladed jig is a jig with a blade on the front of it, kind of like this here. And the first thing you're gonna say, well, that's a chatterbait. Well, yeah, I guess you could call it a chatterbait. The only problem is a chatterbait is a trademark name by Z-Man for their baits, which just happened to be the first bladed jig. Today, there's a lot of different companies putting out bladed jigs. Some of the more popular ones are the Z-Man Jackhammer, and also the Strike King Thunder Cricket. And if you follow along, you know that I produce one that's called the Turbo Minnow. All of them work great. I mean, I could get some jackhammers and fish them just as effective as I fish the Turbo Minnows, because I fish them in a certain manner. And one of the things that you want to do when fishing a bladed jig is think slow, or slower. You know, there's been a big push for high-speed reels and power fishing and all kinds of terms along those lines. Well, bladed jigs is not one you want to use a high-speed reel on, or power fish, so they call it. In fact, most of the time, if not all the time, I'm using a 5:3-to-1 reel and fishing these a whole lot slower than the average person would fish them. And what that does, it really maximizes the action of the bait, both when it's standard running and when it hits cover. When it hits cover, you'll find running it on a slow speed reel will let that bait deflect off the cover a whole lot better than if you run it on a high speed reel. Where you're taking that line up a whole lot faster with that high speed reel. And you just don't get the deflection that you normally would get off of structure. The other thing a high-speed reel will do, it'll wash out your bait or blow it out. There's several different terms. In other words, it'll get it to the point where the blade will cock sideways, and it won't be bouncing back and forth and making the chatter or the vibration. So you got to watch that as well. Now, Like I said, I fish a 5/3 to 1 reel. We got a big old alligator gar here playing. I don't know if you can see him or not, but there's a big old alligator gar here playing right next to the boat. I hope he doesn't hit this bait. There he was right there. The other thing that affects the action on the bait is the trailer. The more drag you have on a trailer, the less vibration and movement you're going to get out of the bait itself. Well, and it depends on the actual action of the trailer you're using. My favorite is just using a split tail. It allows the bait to have great action. And the trailer works. It's wiggling back and forth as the bait shakes back and forth. So it makes a really good trailer. Now I hear a lot of folks saying, you know what, I've never caught a fish on a bladed jig. Which is kind of hard to believe because they are a very effective bait. But the reason a lot of y'all don't catch fish on these bladed jigs is you're just not fishing them right. Like I said, if you put that bladed jig on a high-speed reel at 7.5 or 8.1 or something like that, you're not effectively fishing that bait. You're not leaving it in the strike zone long enough. It's not deflecting off the cover. It's not getting its maximum action. It's not getting its maximum vibration that you get when you're fishing them slower. Plus, you're not leaving that bait in the strike zone long enough. A lot of you just cast it out and reel it in. And that'll catch some fish. Just casting it out and reeling it in will catch some fish from time to time. But if you work the bait, add pops, stop your retrieve, let it fall, dead fall, that kind of thing, you'll find you'll catch a whole lot better fish. A lot of times that bass will key on that bait and start following behind it. And as soon as you pause and let it drop, he'll hammer it. And sometimes they won't hit it on the pause. They'll wait for you to start to retrieve again. And as soon as it starts to move again, bam, they hit it. No, I'm not a big time pro. I'm not a Bassmaster Classic winner or anything like that. However, for folks that have been following along me over the years, you'll know I catch a lot of big fish on bladed jigs. I catch a lot of big fish on the bladed jigs I make myself. They're very effective in grass, like hydrilla, sparse reeds, that kind of thing. They are very effective. A lot of time that hydrilla, you'll get it where it's bogged down in the hydrilla and you pop it to get it out of that hydrilla, and that causes that bait to hesitate and sink a little bit, and that's when that bass hammers it. Especially if he's been following. Now, one thing about bladed jigs, they are not very effective in timber. Or let me rephrase that, brush. I like to fish them in stumps. I like to fish them around trees in the water. Pollards. docks, that kind of thing, I like to fish them. But if you get where there's a lot of brush, you're going to lose a lot of bait. And I like to run that bait, especially in timber or stumps, where that bait will hit that stump and deflect off that stump, or hop up over top of that stump. That's what draws them bites when your bait does something like that. Now we talked about the reel. We talked about using a slow speed reel. I use a 5-3-to-1. Some folks use 5-1-to-1 or 5-6-to-1. Something in the 5 range generally does a good job on these baits. I prefer fluorocarbon line because it sinks. Some of the bladed jigs out there tend to rise as you bring them in. So the fluorocarbon line will help reduce that some. I generally use 12 to 14 pound test with primarily, I mostly use 14, but I will go down to 12. And if the hydrilla is really thick, or the stump fields are thick or something like that, I will go up to 70. The lighter the line you use, the better action you'll get out of the bait. Got a bulkhead here. One of the methods I use fishing these on the bulkhead is I just pitch it up to the bulkhead, let it sink. When it hits the bottom, I'll give it a tug and then reel. And a lot of times, as soon I give it that tug, it pops it up off the bottom, it hesitates for a second, and as soon as I start to move that bait, bam, that's when I get the hit. Now, the water here is pretty nasty today. We had a cold front move through over the weekend, had a lot of rain, so it's dirtied up the water here. So I just don't know how effective it's going to be on a day like today if you're thinking I'm going to catch some fish. And I'm definitely not going to catch some fish throwing up on top of the bulkhead and getting stuck. So we're going to fish here. Oh. Well, I actually thought that was a hit, and it wasn't. I got my bait stuck. I thought I was going to get one of them omens where I said, well, we're not going to catch any fish today, and immediately one hit. But that's not the case. There we go, we got it loose. Another effective way to fish them along bulkhead is to get where you're casting parallel to the bulkhead. That's kind of hard to do if you got somebody in the back of your boat, because then they don't have any chance of catching anything really. I mean, but it is an effective means of fishing. The rod I use is a medium heavy. I prefer a 7'3" rod, and I also prefer that medium heavy to have a moderate tip. And what that moderate tip does is when that bass hits it, he gets to load up on that bait, get it a little bit deeper in his mouth as you're setting the hook, and it'll give you a more effective hook set, and you won't lose as many fish. But if you don't have a 7'3" medium heavy with a moderate tip, and you got a 7-foot medium heavy, that'll work. If you got a 7'6" medium heavy, heck, that'll work too. You will catch fish. especially if you pair it with a low-speed reel. And for you younger fishermen out there that's just getting started or been after bass for a few years, and you only have 2 or 3 setups, I can understand not having a 5/3-to-1 reel. Believe me, I was in that boat at the time. Actually, when I started tournament fishing, I was in the Air Force. And enlisted in the Air Force, you don't get paid anywhere near what I'm getting paid today. So if you can't afford a low-speed reel, a 6.3 or a 6.5 can work for you. You just have to crank it a whole lot slower. Get in the habit of working that bait slower with that reel. The old bulkhead. Pitch it to the bulkhead, let it drop, pop it up, and then reel it, and hammered it. That's a real good Bayou bass right there. Oh, that was a good one. There we go. I knew there was more in there. This one here ain't as big as the one I lost, but ouch! Little dude. Well, I don't know what the heck happened there. Had a big hit and it was gone. Looks like the line was cut. So I'm thinking it was maybe a gator drawer. Decent bass biting. And another one running parallel to the bulkhead. Now that, fellas, gals and girls, that's a monster bayou bass right there. That's a monster. And he inhaled it. Catching one like this on the bayou is kind of like catching a 10-pounder on Lake Sam Rayburn. Yes, sir. That's a dandy right there. That's about as nice a bass as you'd ever want to catch on a bayou. Let's put her back in there because she's going to spawn this spring. Well, folks, that's going to do it for today. I hope some of the tips I give you about fishing bladed jigs help you out. You can start catching some more fish and bigger fish. Like I said, slow. Think slow or slower when you're fishing bladed jigs. It was actually kind of bad conditions here on the bayou today. I really didn't expect to catch anything, but the techniques I use, the low speed reels and everything, and hey, I gotta tout the turbo minnows. They put some fish in the boat today. In fact, that one real big bayou bass hit that turbo minnow. So until next time, tight lines, and hey, take a kid fishing. Bye.